No one ever talks about this, but every time an avoidant loses someone, whether they ended it or you did, they go through an emotional breakdown that no one sees, not even them. I want you to imagine their emotional journey like a 7-day weather forecast. Each day of the week represents a new stage in their internal collapse. We're going to walk through each of these days. Let's start with Monday. Monday's forecast, separation elation. The first stage hits immediately after the breakup, and the weather forecast? Completely sunny. This is what I call separation elation, and it's exactly what it sounds like. The avoidant experiences a genuine high from regaining their freedom. They've won back what matters most to them, their independence. Now you might be thinking, but Jen, how do we know this is real and not just them putting on a show? Great question. Research actually backs this up. According to Free to Attach, after a relationship ends, people with an avoidant attachment style do not show much anxiety or distress, often feeling an initial sense of relief at the relinquishing of the obligations and the sense that they are regaining their self-identity and not tending to initially miss their partner. This is separation elation, as the pressure to connect is gone. In other words, they're not faking it. They genuinely feel relief. Think about it from their perspective. For months, or maybe even years, they've been fighting an internal battle between their need for connection and their fear of losing themselves in the relationship. Every time you wanted more closeness or asked for reassurance, it triggered their core wound. So when the relationship ends, it's like a pressure valve has been released. You can actually see this play out in real time in this Reddit post right here. Okay, so it's rare actual avoidant dumpers post honestly on here. This isn't my current deal, but the last time I dumped someone, yes, I felt enormous relief. However, I felt relief because I cared about the person I dumped and because that person mattered to me. While I can only speak for myself as an avoidant, the more I care about someone, the more overwhelming and anxiety-producing the pressure to be good for them is. The sunny weather of separation elation isn't them being intentionally heartless. It's their nervous system finally relaxing after being in a state of chronic activation. But here's what you need to understand. This sunny weather doesn't last forever. In fact, it's often the calm before the storm. After all, Tuesday is around the corner. Numbing. With Tuesday, the initial high of separation elation begins to fade. The weather starts to shift. The bright sunshine gives way to the overcast skies, and we enter what I call the numbing stage. So this is where things get interesting, because this is where the avoidance primary coping mechanism kicks into overdrive. Think of it like a dimmer switch on their emotions. During separation elation, that switch might be halfway down. But now, they have it turned all the way off. The cloudy weather of this stage represents an emotional suppression at its peak. They generally don't seek support from friends or family. They prefer to handle the breakup solo to uphold an image of self-sufficiency. So let's have some fun. Let's list out all the crazy distractions that avoidants will engage in to uphold that image. You have video games, throwing themselves into work with an intensity that borders on obsessive, eating alone, going to the movies alone, and working out for hours in the rain even though you told them not to go out in the middle of a thunderstorm. By the way, all these are things my real husband does, who is an admitted avoidant. He wasn't pleased to be featured in this video. The point is, avoidants will do anything that keeps their mind occupied and away from processing what just happened. Psychologically, this is the continuation of their deactivation strategy, or what attached authors Rachel Heller and Amir Levine call any behavior that is thought to squelch intimacy. The thing to remember is that they feel the heartbreak, but they reflexively repress or numb those feelings in order to cope. Why, might you ask? Because deep self-reflection is uncomfortable for them. It triggers guilt or shame. I want you to pretend you're 6 years old, and every time you show up with an emotion like crying when you're hurt or asking for a hug, you were met with either silence or irritation. Maybe your parents weren't cruel, just emotionally unavailable. So you learn quickly that you're going to have to solve your own problems. Now fast forward to adulthood. When their thoughts of their past partner arise, they quickly distract themselves or double down on the negative narratives about you. They tell themselves, I'm not missing them, they were too needy. By avoiding conscious acknowledgement of painful feelings, they get the short-term relief from heartbreak. It's an example of what psychologists call maladaptive emotional regulation, or in layman's terms, strategies used to manage emotions and behaviors that are ultimately unhelpful in the long run. Almost always, this creates problems down the line. And that's exactly what happens next on Wednesday. Intrusive feelings. Wednesday, it's the worst. After all, why else would Gomez and Morticia name their darling daughter after the worst day of the week? The cloudy skies of numbing can only last for so long before the storm hits. And when it does, it hits hard. For many avoidants, the real emotional impact of the breakup hits on delay. And this makes so much sense when you consider the time dilation rules that chain avoidance down. Here's what I mean by time dilation. Secure people experience time as it is. If it's been 30 days since the breakup, it feels like 30 days. But anxious people experience time stretched. Those same 30 days feel like 60, filled with rumination and pain. But avoidants, they compress time. 30 days might feel like a week to them. Why? Because they aren't emotionally present in the pain. Their brain files the breakup under handled, while their body has no idea what's coming. It's like hitting the snooze button on heartbreak. So as weeks or months pass, especially if a new stress or trigger brings you to mind, the feelings they've been suppressing begin to surface. First through triggers, something small like a song, a scent, or seeing someone that looks like you can hit them like a freight train. Second, through emotional flooding. They feel suddenly overwhelmed for no clear reason, only to realize later that it's grief leaking through the cracks. And third, through dreams or intrusive memories. Their mind starts replaying moments with you, even if they consciously believe they're over it. And it's really at this point where their feelings begin to surface and their emotional suppression starts to crack. The attachment system that was offline reactivates in spurts. Think of that dimmer switch I mentioned earlier flickering on and off unpredictably. Oh, and I haven't even gotten to the craziest part. Because they've postponed their grief, this process can feel intense when it finally arrives. I mean, I know this is going to sound controversial, but I think sometimes even exceed what anxious individuals feel. Why? Because anxious people process their emotions gradually, while avoidants experience it all at once when their defenses finally break down. I came across a Reddit comment that perfectly captures what this stage feels like from a regular person's perspective. Literally nothing you do is the right thing. You want space and distance? Okay, please take it, and I'll be patient here. Nope, not right. You want closeness and affection? Nope, pull away and get distant. That internal contradiction, that's the thunderstorm of conflicting emotion. It's also why Wednesday Addams is always so depressed. But not all is lost. You'll be happy to know that it doesn't last forever. It gets worse with Thursday. Bargaining. As the thunderstorm of intrusive feelings become too overwhelming to bear, the avoidants move into what I call the bargaining stage. The weather here? Thick fog. I think fog is the perfect metaphor because this stage is all about confusion and limited visibility. The avoidant can't see clearly anymore. Not their feelings, not their motivations, not even what they really want. This is where they basically try to talk themselves out of how they're feeling. The self-talk becomes intense. It wasn't going to work out anyway. I'm better off on my own. They were the problem, not me. That internal dialogue helps them maintain a positive self-image and a sense of control. By blaming the breakup on external factors or your faults, they reinforce the idea that ending it was for the best. But here's what's really happening. They're bargaining with their own emotions. The Attachment Project notes that in spite of the fact that avoidants may regret breaking up, they may regard their ex-partner negatively. We talked about that already. And convince themselves that the breakup was their ex's fault. Therefore, they may talk themselves into thinking that the breakup was the best decision they ever made. The fog represents this mental confusion. They're trying to navigate their way back to emotional safety, but they can't see clearly enough to know which direction to go. And this is where things get really interesting because stage 4 is actually a crossroads. Depending on how successful they are at this bargaining process, they'll branch into one of two very different paths. We see that with Friday and Saturday, or as I'm calling, the branching paths. Here's where the weather forecast gets complicated because avoidants don't follow the same path from here. Based on how they respond in the bargaining stage, they'll experience one of two very different weather patterns. Some avoidants will stumble into Friday, phantom X obsession. During Thursday, when the avoidant is stumbling through that thick fog, one of the things they'll be faced with is the constant obsession over you. The weather here is a rainbow, which might seem strange, but hear me out. A rainbow appears after a storm when the conditions are just right. There's still moisture in the air, but the sun is breaking through. It's beautiful, but it's also an illusion. This is exactly what happens with a Phantom X obsession. You become this internalized version of what they lost. Beautiful, perfect, but ultimately not real. Now I've noticed tons of people going through breakups saying avoidants are just narcissists because the devaluation and the comparing to the unrealistic perfect version of the ex is also seen in narcissistic abuse cycles. But here's the key difference. It's about intent and control. Avoidants and narcissists might have similar actions, but for completely different reasons. And crucially, I believe avoidants can change while narcissists typically don't. And I'm not the only one who thinks about this. Check out this YouTube comment on my husband's YouTube channel. That's a very fine line between avoidants and narcissists. They use you and have no feelings for you. It's about them. Now, I totally understand why people feel this way, but the Phantom X obsession isn't about using you. It's about avoidance inability to process loss in a healthy way. Let's go back to Thursday for a moment. What about those poor souls who get lost in the fog? Well, those are the people who stumble their way into Saturday. Complete shutdown. Saturday is cold, like blizzard cold. Avoidants here isolate and completely cut off visibility to the outside world. In this path, avoidants move inward and only trust themselves. They hide behind walls they're building, becoming even more self-reliant than before. An extreme example of this is when they block you on everything. Not because they're over you, but because it's the only way they know how to protect themselves. Call me crazy, but I think that blocking someone is actually an indication that they're not over you. It's more of a method of emotional survival. And that leads us to Sunday, the vicious cycle. I am going to say something crazy now. No matter which branching path the avoidant takes, the Phantom X obsession or the complete shutdown, these weather patterns always end up cycling back to Monday again. The week flips over. It's a vicious cycle. Either they get involved with someone new, often the Phantom X, and eventually break up again, winding up back at Monday, or they wall themselves off so completely that they eventually convince themselves that they're better off alone, which also leads back to that sunny weather of separation elation right in the middle of Monday. This cycle continues because they never actually process the core wound that drives their avoidant behavior in the first place. So why does this matter to you? What's the point? Understanding this breakdown isn't about getting an avoidant back. It's about understanding that their behavior, the apparent ease with which they moved on, the lack of contact, the seeming indifference, none of it was about you or you not being good enough. They went through their own private hurricane just in a completely different way than you did. While you might have cried and reached out to friends or felt the pain immediately, they experienced a delayed internal storm that they weathered alone. Every single stage of this breakdown was about them trying to manage their own attachment wounds and fears of intimacy. It was never a reflection of your value or the relationship's potential. The real tragedy in this cycle, in my opinion, is that the avoidants don't even realize they're going through it. The weather changes happen so gradually and their coping mechanisms are so automatic that they experience this breakdown without conscious awareness. They might notice feeling off during the thunderstorm stage or confused during the fog of the bargaining, but they rarely connect these feelings to the loss of the relationship. Instead, they attribute their emotional weather to work stress, life changes, or anything else that feels safer to acknowledge. And it's that lack of awareness that keeps them trapped in the cycle. Without recognizing the pattern, they can't break free from it. If you're watching this because you're trying to understand what your avoidant ex went through, I want you to know that this knowledge isn't meant to give you hope for reconciliation. It's meant to give you closure. Understanding their hidden breakdown can help you realize that their behavior wasn't personal. It wasn't about you not being enough or not being the right person or loving them correctly. It was about their own internal weather system that they've been carrying long before they met you. Your job now isn't to be their meteorologist, predicting their emotional weather patterns or trying to help them navigate the storm. Your job is to focus on your own healing and your own growth and your own journey towards secure attachment. The avoidance breakdown after losing you is real. It's painful and it's completely hidden from view, but it's also not your responsibility to fix them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone experience their own weather patterns while you focus on creating clear skies in your own life. The forecast for your future? That's entirely up to you.